Hey everyone, it's Timmy Gobbles, and I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be looking at procedural generation, proc-gen for people who can't pronounce procedural. Today I'm going to be working on level design, specifically auto-generated levels. So procedural generation or proc-gen or whatever you like to call it. And so I don't know a lot about this subject. So today I'm going to go over two of kind of the entry-level procedural generation algorithms that you might try if you're new like me and stuff like that. Anyway, so the first one is going to be random room. And just to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to do in the code, I'm going to try to draw it in paint so that it makes some sense. So suppose we have a big old rectangle, and this is just going to be our dungeon. So what we might want to do is make some rooms randomly, and we might want to have like some sizes. So maybe maybe this is too big of a room, and maybe this is too small. So we want the code to have sort of a range of room sizes that we're interested in. And then when we're doing random rooms, what we do is we'll spawn a random rectangle and we'll see, does this rectangle collide with any of the other rooms? And we'll say, okay, what's the first one? So, you want the rectangle inside the dungeon. You don't want, this would be bad. So we're not going to generate code that spawns it outside of it. We want it to be inside. And we look at this rectangle and say, okay, it's inside the black box and it's not colliding with any of the rooms. And then we'll spawn a couple more and, just nice little rectangles. And then eventually we're going to get one that collides. And we're going to say, hey, throw that one out. Get that out of here. That one doesn't make sense. This one's not overlapping. It's just completely inside. We don't want that either. So then eventually the dungeon gets a little more crowded and we call it quits. We say, okay, these are the number of rooms I wanted. And you could design your code to either say, I want 10 rooms, or I want to go until the space is pretty much filled. It's kind of up to you and how you want it to look. All right, so let's go through how I'm going to do that in Godot. And we need a way to make rooms. So I end up looking at the rectangle class because the rectangle class has a lot of things built in. So the top left corner of the rectangle is its position, and its size is going to be like the position, the difference between the endpoint and the position. So it has a lot of built-in stuff that's kind of nice. So okay, so we're going to make a make room function that takes basically a position and the width and height, and it's going to fill that matrix with values within that position, within that range. Okay, so then we can put some rectangles on the screen with that. Okay, so then in a dummy function where I'm going to generate a couple of rooms and then fill those rooms with just one of the tiles in my tile map. I picked this one with a little thing on the corner so that I can kind of count how many tiles it takes up, even though it looks kind of stupid. Okay, next up is going to be, we need to connect these rooms. The player needs to be able to move between them. So to do that, we're going to need some nice corridors. Let's use blue, and we'll need lines. And so one way is we could take, however we organize these. I don't remember what the first room was, but I think it was this one, and say, well, we'll just connect this to some other room. So this goes over here, and maybe this room connects here, and then maybe this one connects over here, and this one connects here, and this one connects here. Okay, so now we want to start making corridors. And so let's look at those L shapes. So I have a little notebook that I was using to try and come up with a logic of sorts to figure out how to make these L, shaped corridors. And so here's some pictures of that. What is going on here? Oh, I'm starting to, and there we go. We get my first L, my first backwards L. See, that would be a top. Or actually, that's a bottom? No, that's a top. Bottom would be if it was coming out of the bottom one. Fantastic. Okay, so then we need some kind of function that's gonna check for overlapping. So if we're gonna we need to know when to do a straight and when to do an L. And so if there's some horizontal or vertical overlapping between the rectangles, then we can do a straight. But if there's no overlap, then we're gonna have to do an L. So typically it comes down to try to do a straight path. And if you can't do a straight path, then you're gonna have to do an L path. So then when I want to connect rooms, I want to just call the connect room function. So we're gonna check, is there overlap? Yes. Okay, do a straight. Else, you're gonna have to do an L. So that's the gist of it. Next, we need to think about connecting these rooms. Look at what's going on here. I'm trying to connect these rooms, but I've got all this junk going on. There seems to be errors with how I'm deciding to connect them. And there's some other problems too. So there we go. That is a problem. We need to fix that one. And I need to fix some of the others too. Okay, so it's looking better, but there's still a little bit to be desired. All right, so you can kind of tell some issues we're having here where we're having a lot of corridors going through rooms. And so one way I tried to combat that is by sorting our list of rooms from left to right, top to bottom. So on the far left, we have this room over here. So we're going to want to connect that to the next room, left to right, top to bottom. So the next room would be up here. So we can connect that. And then, we look at this one and we say, okay, the next room is here. So we'll put that there. And then this one. So we can't quite make a straight path, but what we can do is we can have a L shape or a dog leg corridor. There we go. And I'll just kind of go through these. And this one's going to end up connecting to this one. And what's next? So here, we can finally do a straight path, and we can probably fit a straight path here too. All right, and what's nice about this kind of arrangement is it gives the player a path to move from left to right or right to left. So you could put the spawn point in this bottom left room and it goes do, and they can connect to all the rooms. This one branches off, but there's not too many branches, so it gives a nice linear path to your dungeon. Okay, so one of the issues I'm having here is I can't tell what's a room and what's a corridor. So I'm going to go ahead and change how I decide. So I'm going to go ahead and change how I display rooms and corridors. And it won't make the doors like a little point or something. All right, so it's a lot easier to see now where I'm having issues, right? And we're doing this left to right, top to bottom configuration. There are issues though. Suppose I need to go back to making rectangles. So say we have a dungeon like this. That's not good. That's not a good example. So I had to do my dog leg here. Suppose instead of taking like that, this can run into some issues with this where your paths end up colliding with the room still, which was the thing we were trying to avoid. This would go here, and then, you know, this one would have to connect to here, and then this one needs to connect here, so you can have another wonky looking situation. And then as before, it connected quite nicely. And so here you can see with my implementation, I'm having some issues with the rooms connecting to each other not nicely. So random rooms was cool, but I started getting bogged down in all of the different what ifs and how to avoid certain situations. So I looked a little deeper and found binary space partition trees. Binary blah blah blah. So the way this works is we need a new color. Let's use green for our partitions. And the way they work is, so we're going to treat the entire space as a node. And each node is going to have the ability to partition itself into two nodes basically inside of it. So what happens is we're going to split this node down some kind of, and you can split it vertically or horizontally. So let's say we do a vertical split. So now I have two nodes. I have the node on the left and the node on the right, and I have the node that encompasses all of it. So now I've done one split. I want to split again. Maybe like, let's do like a total of 3 splits. Okay, so now I'm going to split the node on the left. So maybe it doesn't have to be down the center. You can design it to have a little wiggle room. And maybe this one splits horizontally. Okay, so now we have 4 nodes. We're going to want to split those nodes. And this one's going to be kind of thin if I split it vertically. So maybe I'll have some logic that says, hey, if its dimensions length-wise are much greater than its dimensions height-wise, then we want to split it vertically. And vice versa. Okay, so that one's split, and then this one could go here, and I think the one on the bottom could go either way. So we'll go ahead and split that like that. Okay, so now we split it 3 times, so we have 8 nodes. Okay, so we need to make rooms. So maybe there's like a long one, and this one could be like that, and put these rooms in here. Okay, so next. Now, I don't know if you remember how, oh, you're supposed to be red. How we want to connect the nodes. So here is a leaf, and here was another leaf. And these were children of this one node. So we want this node to connect its children. So that will connect to there. And then here, you know, this will connect to here, and this one can connect to there. And now this one has to connect to here. We have to do some kind of L. So I'll just do it like that. It doesn't really matter. I don't see any way to fault that. Next, so I want to connect this node to this node because we're going up one level in the hierarchy. And kind of the way I decided to do it was I'd look at the midpoint of the partition and pick one of the nodes and then pick the room closest to that partition. So that would be this room. Now that I've chosen this room, I want to look at my other node and see which room is closer to this room. And it's going to be this one. So I'm going to connect here. And I need to make this a line. Sorry, I'm using paint. I know everyone hates paint, but so this one seems like it's closer to the midpoint. So I'm going to choose this room. And then this one is closer to this. So we're going to make our doggy leg or L, whatever you want to call it. All right. And then again, so this room seems closer to the midpoint. This room seems closest to this room. So this was an easy one. There's still some issues with this algorithm. But this is the main idea. And there's some drawbacks too, right? Like this algorithm doesn't have as linear of a layout. So how am I going to decide which room to put the spawn point and the end point in? Okay, where are we at? So trees and nodes, trees and leaves. One of the things I started doing was I do these little like comment lines to kind of break up my code so it's a little visually easier for me to identify what I'm looking at. That's really useful when the code gets a little too long. This one gets way too long. And so that was a nice little touch. Okay, and our BSP generator needs some info too, like height, width. The tree is there so that we, it makes it easier. Well, I mean, if we make the tree and a function, it'll just go away. So we need to be able to store that tree as a variable. We need some values for our matrix. So I have like 0 is empty, 1's room, 2 is corridor, 3 is door. And I'm going to add and subtract to this. And my idea is that 0 is always empty. And I end up having some negative values. Those are always going to be for like debugging purposes. Like I don't want to show the player the node. Okay, so what are the core functions of tree and node? So the tree needs to be able to split all of its nodes, and we need to do some other things like connect nodes. Maybe connect is actually going to be a node property. So there were two kinds of split, right? There's vertical split and horizontal split. The partition is just going to be represented with a point. Okay, so we also need a code for making the room and then connecting the children. So the leaf, once you split down to a leaf, it's time to tell it to make a room. And I did need to fix this function, but that'll come up later. So I got very gummed up on getting the corridors to work in this as well. And so I am going to have to come back and do some fiddling with it. Don't always expect, I did use my trusty notebook a lot. So, all right, so I ended up having to do this 3-layered if statement thing again. Oh, it's such a mess. Look at it. This drove me nuts. Drove me nuts filling that in. Just absolutely maddening. And I still got it wrong. Half the time I got it wrong. When we get to it, you're gonna see. You're gonna see how many of these I messed up. Okay, so it's time to do a little bit of testing. All right, and there we go. Obviously, there's some errors with how I'm doing the corridors, so I need to go back and fix that. But, we're getting something on the screen, so that's helpful. And so I'm going to go back and fix some of those errors, and then we can see what it's going to look like. See, that looks pretty good right there. All right, cool. There we go. So this is at least connecting properly. The only issue I still have is that I'm cutting off some of the rooms with corridors, and I don't want to be doing that. And it seems to be working fine. I also tried to do a bunch of different functions for like distance of rectangles to points and stuff like that. And they didn't really help with the problem. I can try illustrating it, but there's probably a couple examples. I was trying to figure out a way to prevent corridors from going through rectangles without explicitly testing whether or not they did. Basically, if I had the closest room to a midpoint and then I had the closest room to the room, I thought that I would just be able to avoid it completely. But there's still a couple of situations where because of the way the L corridors work, the corners of them would still end up going through rooms and stuff like that. And my solution ended up being really stupid. And so I have a thought What if when I'm placing my corridor tiles, what if I just make a new door in the rooms? What if I don't just plow through them? And when I'm placing the tiles, I just... Yeah, so what if like when I have a corridor that just plows through a room, we just make a new door in that room, and instead of placing corridor tiles, we'll just leave them as room tiles. And that sounds like an okay solution that ignores the problem. So that's what I'm going to go with for now. Okay, so I need some logic for, based on the value of the matrix at that position and the value that I want to put there, what is this function going to do? Okay, hey, and look at that. Not bad. Nothing's growing through anything, and it looks okay. Oh, so one of the things that Godot 4.2 brought was supposed to be tile rotation. And I couldn't figure out how to do that without doing these funky things on the end of... So that's what these tile atlas source dot transform dot transpose and flip h and flip v are. And so I need to come up with a function that will transform the tiles in order to rotate them, because some of these tiles have certain orientations that matter, especially the interior wall tiles. Okay, then I need lists of the tiles from the tile map that I'm going to use. So I need, what do I need? I need room tiles, corridor tiles, wall tiles. I'm sorry, room wall tiles, corridor wall tiles, and doors. Why end up not using doors, huh? So we'll get all those put in, and then... Okay, so filling in a room is really easy because it's just a rectangle, and the room tiles aren't bad. The only thing that's hard about the room is the walls, right? All right, so if you fill in a room, first we're gonna fill in the center. That part's easy. Then we need to figure out how to fill in the wall tiles. What does this end up looking like? Okay. So for my naive attempt, what I'm gonna do is just use the same walls for everything and see if that makes sense. Okay, so that looks really sloppy. There we go. Now we've got walls. And so for when I want to do the walls, for a lot of these, I need to know what the neighboring values are. So I make a list of those indices for a matrix. And I use a scheme of, I start with the top left neighbor, and then I do the top neighbor and the top right neighbor, and so on and so forth, and I go all the way around. And so that's how I've numbered them. First, I want to check if there's any adjacent for the top left, bottom, or right. Then if there aren't any of those, then I can just check the corners, and I know there will only be one room tile because that's the only other possibility, is that or no adjacent room tiles. And if there's no adjacent room tiles, then I don't know what to do. I'm just not going to put anything there. All right, so once we get that all set up, here we go. Ta-da! Look, there's walls. Beautiful. And next, we need to look at the neighbors for the corridors. And if the neighbor has no value, then it needs to be a corridor wall, because we don't want the player just to be able to run off the screen. And ta-da! Oh, wait, it's off-center. Something's wrong. Oh, yeah, because I need to go -1 to 1. All right, and there we go. And then let's go ahead and slap the player on there. And, okay, we need to spawn it inside a room. So we're just going to pick, like, one of the rooms and put them in the center of that room, or not even the center, you know. We can just get that position from the tile map, and the room, like if we just pad a couple from the top left corner, 2 spaces, I guess is fine. And there we go. Now we've got the player moving around inside of our random map. Beautiful. And that's about all I have to say about ProcGen today. Next week, I'm going to be working on, or I guess next week I'll have a video out on having a map maker inside of your game. So, you know, maybe we generate a random map and it looks kind of lame, or we want to add something to it, or we want to make one of the rooms bigger. And so it'd be kind of cool to be able to edit these maps inside the game and make your own custom levels. And so I'm going to go through a brief tutorial on how to do that. Then the week after that, I think I'm working on, what am I doing right now? I'm just kind of doing some other more work on this kind of game and seeing how that goes. All right, and if you have any requests you'd like to make for me, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I hope you all have a good one. See you next time.